Every generation gets their big three. Shonen had Naruto, Bleach, One Piece. Dark Shonen had JJK, Chainsaw Man, and Hell's Paradise. Now, fantasy has its own. It started with Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, an anime so good it left the community in shock. Then Delicious in Dungeon took 2024 by storm. 2 years, 2 instant classics. Now Hat Atelier had already crossed 5 million manga copies, and fans were grouping it with the other two before the anime even had a release date. Then the anime finally dropped on Crunchyroll's Spring 2026 lineup, and the big three was officially sealed. And that one person in your circle who watched 3 episodes total and now speaks like they're defending a doctoral thesis on magical infrastructure? Honestly, justified, because these 3 magic systems deserve every word. Every series system is so detailed, so weirdly logical, and so committed to their own rules that you could probably lock 10 scholars in a room and get a 3-hour argument about magical theory. So today, we're doing exactly that. Frieren, Delicious in Dungeon, Hat Atelier, 3 completely different worlds, 3 completely different ideas of what magic should be. Let's start with the elf who spent 1,000 years turning appearing harmless into an art form. Frieren's magic system is built on a surprisingly simple idea. Magic is not about raw power, it's about understanding. Mana is the foundation of everything. It's an invisible energy surrounding living beings, and mages spend years learning how to sense it. Not days, not months, years, sometimes centuries. Mana detection isn't treated like a cool bonus skill either. It's a core part of being a mage. Frieren and Fern spend huge amounts of time simply feeling the mana around them, which sounds boring until you realize mana in this world is basically social media followers for demons. The bigger your mana output, the higher your status. Power and pride are tied together. Demons look at mana the way some people look at luxury cars. So Frieren takes one look at that entire social structure and goes, interesting. I will now become the world's greatest liar. For over 1,000 years, she suppresses her mana. Not for a day, not for a decade, a millennium. Demons see her and think she's some average mage. Meanwhile, she's hiding an absurd amount of power. It's one of the most brilliant tricks in fantasy because it doesn't break the system. It uses the system. The rules themselves create the trap. Then comes the most important rule in the entire setting, visualization. If a mage cannot clearly imagine a spell happening, the spell fails. Doesn't matter how much mana they have, no visualization, no magic, which creates one of the coolest divisions between humans and demons. Humans treat magic like science. Research it, study it, improve it, standardize it, share it. A human sees a spell and immediately starts thinking about peer review. The perfect example is Zoltrak. Originally created by the demon qual, it was known as killing magic. This thing was terrifying. It could pierce defensive barriers and destroy human mages. Then humans got hold of it, and humanity did what humanity always does. They started taking notes, they studied it, analyzed it, and reverse engineered it. By the time Qual returned, his terrifying ultimate weapon had become beginner-level offensive magic. Imagine spending years creating the world's most dangerous invention, only to come back and discover it's now chapter 1 in a school textbook. Absolutely devastating. For his ego, human magic evolves through collective knowledge. Demon magic works differently. A demon focuses on one discipline, one specialty, one signature spell, then spends centuries perfecting it. The result is incredible mastery, but also incredible rigidity. They're terrifyingly deep in one area and often limited outside it. Human magic adapts. Demon magic hardens, and that's basically the entire conflict in one sentence. Then Frieren adds another layer with folk magic, and this is where things get delightfully weird. A bird-catching spell can work on a bird-like monster even if it isn't technically a bird, because folk magic operates on concepts, not strict scientific categories. The logic isn't, is this biologically a bird? The logic is, close enough. And somehow that works. It's also why Frieren collects seemingly useless spells. A flower-blooming spell might look pointless, but in a world where knowledge builds on knowledge, today's silly little trick could become tomorrow's breakthrough. The funniest part? Frieren's greatest strength is also one of her weaknesses. Her understanding of reality is so grounded that she struggles with things that completely defy logic. Some demon spells are difficult for her to comprehend precisely because they don't follow the rules she expects, which is such a fascinating limitation. The genius elf is sometimes held back by being too rational. Now let's move from magical scholarship to something even stranger, eating, the ecosystem. Welcome to Delicious in Dungeon. Dungeon Meshi's magic system feels completely different because magic isn't just a tool, it's part of the environment. Magical energy exists everywhere. People absorb it naturally, like breathing. Every race has a limit to how much magical energy it can hold. Elves have the highest capacity, then gnomes, then tall men, and dwarves sit at the bottom. Run out of magical energy and you pass out. Get exposed to highly concentrated magical energy and it becomes poisonous to animals. Immediately the system feels biological, physical, almost ecological. Magic isn't floating above the world, it's embedded inside it. There are two major magical traditions, elven magic and gnomish magic. Different scripts, different traditions, same underlying fundamentals. The scripts are similar enough that people have confused them in the past, which led to catastrophic golem accidents, just fantasy world things. Then we get to the real star of the show, the dungeon itself. Because in Dungeon Meshi, the dungeon isn't just a location, it's a living magical system. Monsters respawn because the dungeon generates them. Resources replenish because the dungeon maintains a cycle. Everything operates as part of a closed ecosystem. And suddenly, adventuring starts looking very different. You're not just fighting monsters, you're interacting with an environment, a magical biome, a complete system. Even the Dungeon Lord fits into this structure. A Dungeon Lord bonds with the dungeon's power and gains enormous authority within it. They can reshape the dungeon, create and command monsters, exercise incredible control over their territory. The dungeon becomes an extension of them. And this is exactly why Laios' party ends up approaching things differently, because eating monsters isn't just survival, it's participating in the cycle. The food becomes part of the magical ecosystem. The food is mana, which makes Senshi's perspective especially interesting. He understands the dungeon because he respects how it works, not as a battlefield, but as an environment. Then Dungeon Meshi opens the forbidden door, ancient magic, and oh boy, whenever fantasy starts describing something as forbidden, you know somebody is about to make terrible decisions. Ancient magic bypasses the normal limits of magical energy. Instead of relying on personal reserves, it accesses a dimension of infinite magical energy, which allows things normal magic cannot accomplish. Resurrection, monster creation, soul manipulation. The big example is Phelan's revival. Marcille uses Phelan's reassembled bones, the fresh flesh of the red dragon, and forbidden ancient magic circles drawn with her own blood. And it works, but the system immediately reminds everyone that actions have consequences. Bodies and souls are deeply connected. The red dragon carried a curse on its soul. That curse transfers to Phelan. No loopholes, no free passes, no. The plot needed it. The rules remain consistent. That's what makes Dungeon Meshi's magic so compelling. The system doesn't care what you want, it only cares what follows from the rules, which creates an ongoing ethical question. Is resurrection healing, or is it violation? Is bringing someone back an act of love, or an act of interference? The series never escapes those questions. It lives inside them, and that's what makes the world feel so rich. Then we have our latest member of the Big Three, Hat Atelier. The series that walks into the room, looks at centuries of fantasy tradition and says, what if the entire premise was a lie? Because Hat Atelier starts with one massive revelation. Anyone can do magic, anyone. Not some people, not chosen people, not gifted people, anyone. They've simply been told otherwise. Magic here works through conjuring ink derived from the silverwood tree. Using that ink, witches draw magical glyphs. Every spell is a constructed design, not a spoken incantation, not raw willpower, a drawn object. Each glyph contains three major components: a central sigil that defines the elemental essence, signs around it that modify behavior, and a ring surrounding everything. The ring completes the circuit. The moment it closes, the spell activates. No ring, no spell. Simple, elegant, but terrifying if your handwriting is bad, because craftsmanship matters a lot. Bigger seals produce more powerful effects. Cleaner seals create more stable outcomes. Your magical success literally depends on your ability to draw accurately. A messy spell can become unstable. A carefully constructed one can achieve extraordinary results, which means magic becomes a craft, a skill, an art form. Then comes the political bombshell. Long ago, everyone had access to magic. That did not go well. Forbidden magic spread. People pursued eternal youth. Monsters were created, reality itself was distorted, so the witches responded with something drastic. The Day of the Pact, a worldwide memory wipe. Humanity's knowledge of magic was erased. From that point onward, the Council appointed hats controlled access to magical education, And suddenly, the magic system becomes political, because now the question isn't whether magic works, it's who gets to learn it. Forbidden magic in the modern era includes any magic applied directly to living bodies, healing, treating illness, mending wounds, anything involving flesh. The line is absolute, and it's enforced by the Knights Moralis. Meanwhile, the brimmed hats argue that magic belongs to everyone, that the memory wipe was tyranny, that knowledge should not be monopolized. And here's the fascinating part. The conflict isn't simple, because the argument has weight. The entire world is built around that tension. Who controls knowledge? Who decides what's dangerous? Who gets access to power? Then there's Coco, and what makes her special isn't overwhelming strength. It's creativity. She approaches magic as both an artist and a problem solver. She looks at existing structures and finds new possibilities inside them. Because in Hat Atelier, mastery isn't about having more power, it's about understanding the system better. And that's what makes the entire world feel so alive. So after all that, what's the difference between these three magic systems? All three follow completely different rules, yet every single one feels believable inside its own world. Frieren sees magic as accumulated knowledge, understanding built over centuries, patience rewarded, experience compounded. Dungeon Meshi sees magic as ecology, a force connected to everything, balanced by consequences, governed by systems larger than any individual. Hat Atelier sees magic as access to knowledge, a craft that anyone can learn, a skill tied directly to questions of freedom and control. And somehow, after watching all three, you end up sitting there at 2 in the morning, wondering whether you'd rather attend a 1,000-year-old elf lecture, eat a monster stew, or enroll in the world's most politically controversial art class. Honestly, that's a pretty great problem to have. Which magic system would you want to learn?